party now heads towards its policy conference this weekend. This region is also calling for the scrapping of the step-aside rule, which says members charged with serious crime should step aside from party positions. Well, let's discuss this and other matters relating to the ANC with political analyst Imran Bacchus. Imran, thank you very much for your time. You know, a few months ago, I think many people would have thought that Cyril Ramaphosa was a shoo-in to become or to stay as ANC president at the end of the year. After what we've seen happening in KwaZulu-Natal this past weekend, do you think that his future's not so certain?
Well, it's certainly a huge blow for Cyril Ramaphosa. You know, KZN remains the largest voting bloc, and we saw 1,600 delegates at the conference in Durban. So certainly a huge blow to Ramaphosa, but I think Ramaphosa will be in no hurry to see Sihle Zikalala removed as the Premier. I think the longer Sihle stays in as the Premier, the better for the President. But we're certainly going to have a lot of tension, two centers of power, and no doubt lots of pressure coming from the new leadership of the ANC in KZN that's going to impact on the President.
And it's interesting, these two groupings identifying as the Taliban, which as a woman I find deeply offensive, bearing in mind what the Taliban does to women. And this is seen as the sort of more RET-aligned grouping. And the Ankole, of course, referring to the cattle that the president loves to breed. Do you think that Zweli Mkhize, the former health minister, of course, ousted over the scandal around the Digital Vibes contract, is going to be making a big move to challenge the president in December?
Well, I think those moves are afoot already, but I also think that Zweli Mkhize might be overstating his capacity to mobilize in KZN. I don't think, you know, what Zweli, in terms of the power he has in KZN, that has not been fully demonstrated. And, you know, this remains a deeply divided province, despite what we saw over the weekend. And I think a lot is set to happen prior to the conference in December. And bearing in mind the pace and the ferociousness of our politics, I won't be surprised if we have even another candidate emerging prior to the December conference. So I would say all in all, Zweli might really be overstating his capacity to mobilize support in KZN.
What if he has, and I think he does, have the support of former President Jacob Zuma, who's still a powerful figure in the province?
Yeah, he does, Sally, but, you know, it all depends on how the cards fall when we reach December and how people vote. The reality is, even prior to Sihle Zikalala being removed at the conference over the weekend, you know, much was happening behind the scenes, particularly in terms of which way the eThekwini region would go. And the same would apply when we reach December. I think we know full well from our experiences at the National Elective Conference that the politics of patronage kicks in, and it kicks in with all its toxicity. And that, I think, has a huge impact on whether or not Zweli or anyone else would get that support in December.
I've mentioned Jacob Zuma. Let's focus on another former president, Thabo Mbeki, who took quite a swipe at President Ramaphosa last week during Jesse Duarte's memorial here in Johannesburg, basically saying there's absolutely no plan for basically anything. We've seen the president sort of hit back in some way last night, in fact, from Durban. Do you think, first of all, that Mbeki's comments were fair? And also, if we consider Mbeki's legacy, this is the man, of course, who denied that HIV leads to AIDS. Do you think he's in any position to be making those comments?
Well, I certainly think his comments were not fair. I mean, the comments that Mbeki made are not new. I think he draws from his brother Moeletsi Mbeki and the comments that he's been making. And, you know, it goes without saying that we certainly have the ingredients for an Arab Spring or an African Spring to occur in South Africa, and that's been discussed at length. You know, the reality is that a lot happened under Mbeki, and we certainly had those ingredients for a revolution even under Mbeki. if one just looks at, beyond Zimbabwe and beyond AIDS denialism, if one looks at the overwhelming neoliberalism during Mbeki's time, the height of it was experienced, just prior in 96 to 2000, which coincided with his term. And in that period, for those of us who follow that would know that we lost 1 million jobs, we had 2 million evictions, and we had 10 million people cut off from water and electricity. We know that a large part of the working class, particularly those who worked in the textile industry and the leather industry, those industries were decimated, all under Mbeki's rule. And the unemployment we talk about, the bloodbath, which, is worse than what it was in the era of the Depression in the US or in 2008. The unemployment we have here in South Africa compares to places like Gaza. And, all of that happened during Mbeki's time. The other thing that really fascinates me is I would think that Mbeki would have Ramaphosa on speed dial. And in line with the tradition of the ANC, talking to an elder statesman or talking to a statesman in power, one would expect Mbeki to have gone that route. And one wonders whether he's really concerned about his relevance, trying to be relevant, trying to emerge on the political scene, and really concerned that he might be becoming less relevant despite the sort of intellectual gravitas that he carries. So all in all, I think really unfair of Mbeki to enter the debate in the way he did.
And of course, this weekend, it's the ANC's Policy Conference. And the big issue of the step-aside rule is hotly contested. The ANC in KwaZulu-Natal saying this weekend it should be scrapped. I mean, not just revised in some way to make it absolutely clear. It seems that Limpopo ANC might be supporting them. What do you expect to come out of this policy conference? Do you think that the step-aside rule is going to be the sort of the make or break moment?
Well, I think certainly Sihle KZN is going to push for that step-aside rule to be removed, and certainly they will get support from a number of other provinces, because we know it affects a number of other people in a range of provinces. But there are a few things that we need to remember. I think one is that the elective conference, that's the decision-making body, and that's where the decision will be made. I think a resolution can be taken from the policy conference to the December conference, but certainly that rule can't be rescinded until the December conference. We should also bear in mind that that came about to protect the ANC, to protect South Africans, and the irony is that Ramaphosa himself may need to walk the plank in terms of that rule. So we should really be careful of the sort of grandstanding that we're seeing. But the highest decision-making in terms of that rule is only set to occur in December. So I can't see it having a huge impact on Ramaphosa, bearing in mind that, we have until December for that to be considered.
All right. Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening, political analyst Imran Bakas.